Today's video is going to be a little different. In the next video, I'll be looking at the question of why interest exists. It's a complicated question that has confounded economists since ancient times. There are a variety of rationales offered for the existence of interest, and Silvio Gesell offered an explanation that's logical and compelling. But before delving into that, we need to dispel some irrational habits of thought related to this subject. For example, one common explanation for the existence of interest is that it's a reward for delayed gratification. But is that notion consistent with the laws of nature? Is it consistent with common sense? If a squirrel abstains from consuming nuts and stores them for winter, does the quantity of nuts increase as a result of postponing consumption? Obviously not. If anything, the reverse happens. So why do we take it as self-evident that people should be rewarded for delaying consumption? Is a meal today more valuable or more necessary than a meal next week or next month? Let's ask the question another way. If someone were to offer you two choices, you could either receive 52 gallons of milk today, or you could receive a gallon of milk every week for the next year. Which would you choose? And if you would choose the latter, doesn't that seem to indicate the exact opposite of the notion that delayed gratification deserves to be rewarded? So to prepare the ground for a rational examination of the phenomenon of interest, Gesell presented a variation on the classic story of Robinson Crusoe, which aims to dismantle some erroneous ideas about interest. So I'm going to simply read that section from Gesell's book. I'll put a link in the description for anyone who wants to read it for themselves. So here's the story of Robinson Crusoe as told by Silvio Gesell. To introduce the theory of interest here expounded, and to facilitate the removal of old prejudices which are nowhere stronger than in connection with the subject of interest, I shall begin with the story of Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe, as is well known, built his house, from motives of health, on the south side of the mountain, whereas his crops grew on the damp but fruitful northern slopes. He was therefore obliged to carry his harvests over the mountain. To eliminate this labor, he decided to construct a canal around the mountain. The time required for this enterprise, which, to avoid silting, would have to be continued without interruption, he estimated at 3 years. He had, therefore, to lay in provisions for 3 years. He slaughtered some pigs and cured their flesh with salt. He filled a deep trench with wheat, covering it carefully with earth. He tanned a dozen buckskins for suits and nailed them up in a chest, enclosing also the stink glands of a skunk as a precaution against moths. In short, he provided amply and, as he thought, wisely for the coming 3 years. As he sat calculating for the last time whether his capital was sufficient for the projected undertaking, he was startled by the approach of a stranger, obviously the survivor of a shipwreck. "Hello, Crusoe," shouted the stranger as he approached. "My ship has gone down, but I like your island and intend to settle here. Will you help me with some provisions until I have brought into a field into cultivation and harvested my first crops?" At these words, Crusoe's thoughts flew from his provisions to the possibility of interest and the attractions of life as a gentleman of independent means. He hastened to answer yes. "That's splendid," replied the stranger, "but I must say at once that I shall pay no interest. I would prefer to keep myself alive by hunting and fishing, for my religion forbids me to pay or to receive interest." Crusoe: "An admirable religion. But from what motive do you expect me to advance you provisions from my stores if you pay no interest?" Stranger: "From pure egoism, my dear fellow, from your self-interest rightly understood, because you gain, and gain enormously." Crusoe: "That, stranger, you have to prove. I confess that I can see no advantage in lending you my provisions free of interest." Stranger: "I shall prove it in black and white, and if you can follow my proof, you will agree to a loan without interest and thank me into the bargain." "I need, first of all, clothes, for, as you can see, I'm naked. Have you a supply of clothes?" Crusoe: "That chest is packed with buckskin suits." Stranger: "My dear Crusoe, I had more respect for your intelligence. Just fancy nailing up clothes for 3 years in a chest. Buckskins, the favorite diet of moths. And buckskins must be kept aired and rubbed with grease, otherwise they become hard and brittle." Crusoe: "That's true, but I have no choice in the matter. There would be no safer in my clothes cupboard, less safe indeed, for it's infested by rats and mice as well as by moths." Stranger: The mice will get them in any case. Look how they've already started to gnaw their way in. Crusoe, confound the brutes. I'm helpless against them. Stranger, what? A human being helpless against mice? I will show you how to protect yourself against rats and mice and moths, against thieves and brittleness, dust and mildew. Lend me these clothes for 1, 2, 3 years, and I agree to make you new clothes as soon as you require them. You will receive as many suits as you've lent me, and the new suits will be far superior to those you would have taken from this chest. Nor will you regret the absence of the particular perfume you've employed. Do you agree? Crusoe, yes, stranger, I agree to lend you the chest of clothes. I see that, in this case, the loan, even without interest, is to my advantage. Stranger, now show me your wheat. I need some for bread and seed. Crusoe, it's buried in this mound. Stranger, wheat buried for 3 years? What about mildew and beetles? Crusoe, I've thought of them and considered every other possibility, but this is the best I can do. Stranger, just bend down a moment. Observe this beetle crawling on the surface of the mound. Note the garbage and the spreading patch of mildew. It's high time to take out and air the wheat. Crusoe, this capital will be my ruin. If only I could find some method of protecting myself against the 1,000 destructive forces of nature. Stranger, let me tell you, Crusoe, how we manage at home. We build a dry and airy shed and shake out the wheat on the boarded floor. Every 3 weeks, the whole mass is turned over with wooden shovels. We also keep a number of cats. We set mouse traps and insure against fire. In this way, we keep the annual depreciation down to 10%. Crusoe, but the labor and expense. Stranger, exactly. You shrink from the labor and expense. In that case, you have another course. Lend me your wheat, and I shall replace it, pound for pound, sack for sack, with fresh wheat from my harvest. You thus save the labor of building a shed and turning over the wheat. You need feed no cats, you avoid the loss of weight, and instead of moldy rubbish, you'll have fresh, nutritious wheat. Crusoe, with all my heart, I accept your proposal. Stranger, that is, you'll lend me your wheat free of interest? Crusoe, certainly, without interest and with my best thanks. Stranger, but I can only use part of the wheat. I don't need it all. Crusoe, suppose I give you the whole store with the understanding that for every 10 sacks lent, you'll give me back 9 sacks. Stranger, I must decline your offer, for it would mean interest. Not indeed positive, but negative interest. The receiver, not the giver of the loan, would be a capitalist, and my religion does not permit usury. Even negative interest is forbidden. I propose, therefore, the following agreement. Entrust me with the supervision of your wheat, the construction of the shed, and whatever else is necessary. In return, you can pay me annually from every 10 sacks, 2 sacks as wages. Crusoe, it makes no difference to me whether your service comes under the heading of usury or of labor. The agreement is, then, that I give you 10 sacks and that you give me back 8 sacks. Stranger, but I need other articles, a plow, a cart, and tools. Do you consent to lend them also without interest? I promise to return everything in perfect order, a new spade for a new spade, a new unrusted chain for a new chain, and so forth. Crusoe, of course I consent. All I have at present from my stores is work. Lately the river overflowed and flooded the shed, covering everything with mud. Then a storm blew off the roof and everything was damaged by rain. Now we have a drought and the wind is blowing in sand and dust. Rust, decay, breakage, drought, light, darkness, dry rot, ants keep up a never-ending attack. We can congratulate ourselves here upon having at least no thieves and incendiaries. I'm delighted that by means of a loan I can now store my belongings without expense, labor, loss, or vexation until I need them later. Stranger, that is, you now see the advantage you gain by lending me your provisions free of interest. Crusoe, of course I do. But the question now occurs to me, why do similar stores of provisions at home bring their possessors interest? Stranger, the explanation lies in money, which is there the medium of such transactions. Crusoe, what? The cause of interest lies in money? That's impossible, for listen to what Marx says of money and interest. Work is the source of interest, surplus value. Interest, which converts money into capital, cannot be derived from money. If it is true that money is a medium of exchange, then its function is merely to pay the price of the goods which it purchases. If it thus remains unchanged, it cannot increase in value. Surplus value, interest, must therefore be derived from the goods purchased, which are sold at an increase of price. This change can neither occur at the time of purchase nor at the time of sale, for on these occasions equivalents are exchanged. The only remaining hypothesis is, therefore, that the change happens through the use of the goods after their purchase and before their sale. Stranger: How long have you been on this island? Crusoe: 30 years. Stranger: I thought so. You still appeal to the theory of value. My dear sir, that theory is dead and buried. At present day it has no representatives. Crusoe: What? You assert that Marx's theory of interest is dead and buried? Even if no one else represents it, I represent it. Stranger: Well then, represent it, not only in theory but also in practice, if you wish, in relation to me. I hereby break off the bargain we've just made. From their nature and destination, your goods are the purest form of what is usually called capital. I challenge you to take up the position of a capitalist toward me. I need your stuff. No worker ever appeared before a capitalist as naked as I stand before you. Never has there been so clear an illustration of the relation between the owner of capital and the individual in need of capital. And now make the attempt to extract interest. Shall we begin our bargaining again from the beginning? Crusoe: Surrender. Rats, moths, and rust have broken my power as a capitalist. But tell me, what is your explanation of interest? Stranger: The answer is simple enough. If there were a monetary system on this island, and I, as a shipwrecked traveler, needed a loan, I would have to apply to a moneylender for money to buy things which you have just lent me without interest. But a moneylender has not to worry about rats, moths, rust, and roof repairing. So I could not have taken up the position toward him that I have taken up toward you. The loss inseparable from the ownership of goods is borne not by moneylenders, but by those who have to store the goods. The moneylender is free from such cares and is unmoved by the ingenious arguments which found the joints in your armor. You did not nail up your chest of buckskins when I refused to pay interest. The nature of your capital made you willing to continue the negotiations. Not so the money capitalist. He would bang the door of his strong room before my face if I announced that I would pay no interest. Yet I do not need the money itself. I only need the money to buy buckskins. The buckskins you give me without interest. But upon the money to buy buckskins, I must pay interest. Crusoe: Then the cause of interest is to be sought in money, and Marx is wrong? Stranger: Of course Marx is wrong. He underestimated the importance of money, the nervous system of economic life. So it's not surprising that he went wrong over things of fundamental importance. Like all of his disciples, he made the mistake of excluding money from the scope of his inquiry. He was fascinated by the shining metal discs. Otherwise, he could never have used the following words: Gold and silver are not by nature money, but money is by nature gold and silver. Witness the coincidence of their natural properties with its functions. Crusoe: Practice certainly does not agree with Marx's theory. That has been clearly proved by our negotiations. Money is for Marx only a medium of exchange, but money does more, it seems, than merely pay the price of the goods it purchases. When the borrower refuses to pay interest, the banker can bang the door of his safe without experiencing any of the cares which beset the owner of goods. That is the root of the matter. Stranger: Rats, moths, and rust are powerful logicians. A single hour of economic practice has taught you more than years of study in the textbooks. So, if we agree with the logic underlying this theory, it would seem to indicate that interest is not a natural or inevitably occurring phenomenon in an economy made up only of goods and services, which, if true, would imply that the existence of interest is a consequence of the introduction of money into the economy. So the question is, why introducing something that is supposed to be a neutral medium to facilitate the exchange of goods and services fundamentally changes the nature of those exchanges? That'll be the subject of our next video. Thanks for watching.